So UFC 296 is going to be the final card of 2023, but I think it's got the potential to be the best card of 2023. So in this video, I'm just going to talk about the card again. I have already done a prediction video for this card, which I uploaded a couple of days ago, but I just want to talk about it again because I think that this card is going to be special. Now, in this video, though, I'm just going to talk about the fights that I'm most looking forward to and why I think that they're going to be so good and why I think that this card is going to be so good. And I'm going to start off with the fight that actually kind of started it all, because I believe that Alejandra Penta and Brandon Royval do have the potential to put on a fight of the year candidate, because both of these guys are come forward. They're both prepared to just move forward, and they're not going to step back. Like, these guys are just going to stand in the middle when the fight's on his feet, and they're going to be swinging. Someone's getting knocked down. They both could get knocked down. And then when Penta eventually does go for offensive wrestling, Royval's always scrambling. Royval's a tricky guy to hold down. He's going to be trying to scramble to his feet. He's going to be throwing up submission attempts. But so is Penta. Penta's going to be rolling with him. They'll probably get back up to the feet a few times, and then they'll start swinging hands again. If you've seen any of Penta's fights, you'll know that they're good fights. A lot of people were kind of hard on Penta after he beat Moreno. That was a really fun fight, and that was a really good performance from Penta. He knocked down Moreno in round number 1, showed off the hands, and showed off a lot of control with back control. The fight against Perez didn't last long, but that was fun. They both met in the middle, threw hands, and eventually he got on the back of Perez and ended up getting the submission. But Royval is a guy that just doesn't have boring fights. I don't think this guy's ever had a bad fight. He's very aggressive. He can be hittable because of it. And when the fight is on the ground, he's just constantly scrambling. He's constantly moving. He's constantly working. And he just has good fights. He's coming off that knockout win over Matheus Nicolau. And we know that Matheus Nicolau's a pretty good fighter, right? Knocked him out. Fantastic win. Beat Matt Schnell by submission in another fun fight. Schnell's also a fighter, I think, that's underrated for putting on great fights. Took on Bontarine, who's a bit more of a grappler. Had a good one against him. I think both of these guys are going to come forward. They're going to meet in the middle. And they're just going to go to war. I think this is going to be a war for as long as it lasts, because I do not see this fight going all 5 rounds. I'm thinking it's going to end in like round 3, maybe round 2. If it ends in round 2, it might be a little bit too short to call it a fight of the year candidate, even if it is fantastic. But round 3, if we get like 15 minutes, 12 minutes of these guys just going at it, it's going to be a good fight. I think we're in for a good one there. Another fight that I think has potential to be a banger and potentially get a bit scrappy is Vicente Luque versus Ian Garry. Now, this fight has quite a bit of hype around it for a couple of other reasons, which I addressed in my prediction video. I won't talk about them here. When it comes down to the fight, though, Ian Garry is a fighter that does put on fun fights. He's a striker. He's very fluid. He's very technical. He's very calculated. And Luque can do that too. Except Luque's probably going to want to go to war a little bit more with Garry than Garry wants to go to war with Luque. And if these guys start scrapping, if Luque starts to get scrappy, if Luque starts to pressure Ian Garry and forces Ian Garry to fight a sloppy fight, this could get really, really good. And not only that, it could get interesting, because we know that Luque can grapple and we know that Luque can wrestle. We haven't really seen all that much grappling out of Ian Garry, so it'll be interesting to see what he can bring to the table when it comes to that. But if Luque can come forward, can bomb away, can hurt Ian Garry, can make it a little bit sloppy, this could end up being a classic Luque fight and just a banger fight overall to really kick off this card and make it great. But even then, if Garry wins, it'll probably be a fun fight anyway, because we know that Ian Garry does have pretty good fights. He is a striker. He's quite technical. He is quite good to watch. So I think we're going to get a good matchup out of these two as well. Another fight that has potential to be a bit of a banger is Josh Emmett and Bryce Mitchell. Now, I know that you might be thinking that's kind of weird. Yeah, it is a little bit of a weird fight to call a future banger, because that's not how Bryce Mitchell fights at all. It is how Josh Emmett fights, though, and Josh Emmett can make fights quite fun. I think that his takedown defense is going to be enough to keep the fight on the feet. And I think that's going to make things very interesting, because we know that Bryce Mitchell is not the best striker in the world, but we have seen some moments where he has looked pretty good at striking. But if Emmett can keep this fight on the feet, and make it scrappy. The way that Emmett fights more recently is a lot more sloppy and a lot more scrappy than Emmett kind of when he was coming up a bit more as a wrestler, if that makes sense. So he could make things interesting, and if this is an all-striking matchup, I think it would be interesting in general, because we don't know how good Mitchell's striking really is, because he doesn't do it. And obviously that's for a reason, because we know it's not that great. But if these two get stuck for 15 minutes on the feet, I think that we could see a finish, most likely on the Emmett side, of course. I think this could be a good one, and definitely one to watch out for. I even think that Irene Aldana and Carol Rosa should be a good one, because I think that Aldana has the chance of getting a KO. Aldana's boxing is really smooth. We didn't see that in the Nunes fight, but it's really good. Speaking of good boxing, we've got Cody Garbrandt and Brian Kelleher, and I think these two also have a pretty good chance of putting on a great fight. I mean, Brian Kelleher's fights are pretty fun. Now, yes, recently he has been getting finished by Umar Nurmagomedov and Mario Batista, two of the biggest upcoming names in the sport right now. But he is a scrapper. He is a bit more of a grappler, but he can strike. He's a bit more of a wrestler. But when the fight's on the feet, Brian Kelleher always makes things interesting. He's always scrapping. He's always trying to come forward. He's a pressure-forward guy, and he loves to throw down. And Cody Garbrandt probably loves to throw down a little bit too much. That is what has got him caught in the past. That is what has got him knocked out by really good fighters when he gets too aggressive. He shows off his good boxing. He gets someone hurt, and now he runs forward and gets clipped. I'm worried about that happening in the Cody Garbrandt fight for this one, but he's showing a much more patient style against Trevin Jones, and to be fair, that fight wasn't the most exciting fight that we had ever seen, but Cody Garbrandt really needed to get a win back at that point. I think we're going to see a looser Cody Garbrandt, a Cody Garbrandt that's going to come out here with some ill intentions, and these guys are going to throw down. Both of these guys are going to take damage in this matchup, but ultimately, now that I've been thinking about it, I think that we're going to see Garbrandt get a KO win. We haven't seen Garbrandt get a big KO win since he knocked out Rafael Assunção. And yes, you could say that was only 3 fights ago. That was 3.5 years ago, though. That was a long time ago. I think that we could see that out of Garbrandt again. I like Brian Kelleher. Brian Kelleher is a guy that I have been following for a while. I'm actually a fan of Brian Kelleher. But this is Garbrandt's fight, in my opinion. I think Garbrandt's got this. But these guys are going to throw down. These guys are going to scrap. And they're going to put on a great fight for the fans. And another fight that I think is going to be very fan-friendly is a fighter between two guys that are fan-friendly. Andre Fili and Lucas Almeida both put on consistently good fights. And I would say even more so on the Lucas Almeida side. But the thing about Lucas Almeida is people don't know who he is. Trust me. Lucas Almeida puts on good fights. Now, I know that sounds a little bit disrespectful to Andre Fili, because I know a lot of people know who Andre Fili is. A lot of people love Andre Fili and his fights. But you got to trust me on this one. Lucas Almeida, his fights are awesome. This guy is running forward. He's throwing bombs. He's landing bombs. He's got solid striking. And he's just a good striker. But his takedown defense and his grappling defense is his biggest weakness. And Andre Fili very much could try to exploit that in this fight. But Andre Fili hasn't really been wrestling recently, and you know what that means. It means we could be getting a striking fight between two of potentially the more exciting fighters at this weight class at 145. Both guys that have KO power on the feet, both guys that aren't willing to move backwards, both guys that are willing to pressure forward. I think that this is going to be a really fun stand-up fight, or Andre Fili's just going to look really good in the wrestling and grappling. But there's some standout fights that I'm really looking forward to. Of course, the whole card is good. You could add Minifield Jacoby to the list as well. You could obviously bring up Tony Ferguson and Paddy Pimblett in that matchup. But I think that might be a little bit more of a low-volume sort of technical matchup. I know Tony Ferguson can go out there and be super exciting. But at this point, I'm a little bit worried, maybe not. You could also say the same about the Rakhmonov-Thompson fight. You could say, why didn't you bring that up as one of the best fights on the card? It is one of the best fights on the card. But when it comes down to just a pure banger of a fight, I don't know if we're going to get that, because we've got two technical strikers, and Shavkat Rakhmonov is a very good wrestler grappler, and I think it'd be silly not to wrestle and grapple against Stephen Thompson. So I think that we see something along those lines. I do think we're going to see Shavkat get a finish. And then we get to the main event now. I don't think this is going to be a scrap, but I think it has the opportunity to be a war. if that makes sense. Because Colby Covington, we know how he fights. We know what he does. He's always trying to get the fight down to the ground, but Leon Edwards has the takedown defense to keep it on the feet, which is going to make this fight so interesting. Now, Leon Edwards is a very calculated fighter. Somewhat, he's not low volume, but he can be, but just because he's very... he's very calculated. I don't know what the word I was looking for. He's very technical, and I think that he can beat Colby Covington on the feet in this matchup. But Colby Covington, what makes this matchup so interesting is stylistically, this is actually quite a good matchup for him. If Colby Covington can go out there and constantly get the takedowns, he will beat Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards isn't going to have to defend just 1 or 2 takedowns a round. He's going to have to defend like 5 or 6 takedowns a round, maybe even more. His takedown defense is going to have to be on point for this matchup. And I cannot wait for this one too. But let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think of this card? It's kind of like a second prediction video that I just did, but I just needed to talk about this card again. I think this card has the potential to be the best card of 2023. Can we finish the year with the card of the year? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.